What if the reason you can't stop worrying at 2 in the morning isn't because your problems are just too big, but because, maybe your jaw's too tight?
Right. It sounds almost absurd when you frame it that way.
Totally.
Because we're so conditioned to believe that a mental problem absolutely requires a mental solution. Like, if we're stressed, we just assume we need to think our way out of it.
Yeah, like we need a better plan or, I don't know, a deeper understanding of our psychology.
Exactly. A better argument against our own anxiety.
But anyone who has literally stared at the ceiling at 2 a.m. knows that trying to logic your way out of a midnight anxiety spiral is, well, it's like trying to put out a fire with gasoline.
Oh, for sure. It just makes it worse.
The harder you think, the more awake you feel. And that physiological connection, like the link between your racing mind and your clenched jaw, is exactly what we are unpacking today in this deep dive.
It's such a crucial topic.
We are diving into Chapter 4 of a book by Venerable Falangale Ratanathero. And our mission today is to explore what he calls the fourth method. It's this very specific strategy for gradually calming mental activity designed for those, incredibly stubborn thoughts that just refuse to budge.
And to really appreciate how profound this fourth method is, it helps to know where it comes from. Venerable Ratanatharo is drawing this directly from the Buddha's teachings.
Right.
Specifically, it's a discourse called the Vitakasachinana Sutta.
Which is part of the Majjhima Nikaya.
Yes,
Oh, yeah.
exactly. Majjhima Nikaya 20, to be precise. And if you're not familiar with that term, the Majjhima Nikaya is basically a major collection of the Buddha's middle-length discourses.
Okay, let's unpack this a bit more.
Well, you can think of it essentially as a masterclass in early Buddhist psychology. And this specific sutta was designed to solve a problem that is, just as relevant today as it was over 2 millennia ago.
The out-of-control mind.
Exactly, an agitated, out-of-control mind.
So we need to contextualize this fourth method because it isn't the first line of defense, is it? Like the framework Ratanathero lays out presents this as the break glass in case of emergency tool.
Yeah, it's a progressive system. The framework assumes you have already tried 3 other techniques first.
Right.
First, you try replacing an unwholesome thought with a wholesome one. So, trying to replace anger with compassion.
Which honestly requires a pretty massive amount of cognitive control.
It really does. It's not easy. And if that doesn't work, the second method is reflecting on the disadvantages of the thought.
Like telling yourself this is bad for me.
Right, reminding yourself that this rumination is harmful and it's literally keeping you awake.
I gotta say, I find that one often backfires for me. Like I realize the anxiety is bad for me and then I just become, anxious about the fact that I'm anxious. I just start spiraling.
That is such a common trap. You're definitely not alone in that. Which leads us to the third method, simply trying to withdraw your attention.
Just looking away.
Exactly, looking away from the thought. But as we know, when a thought has enough momentum, trying to ignore it is, it's like trying not to think of a pink elephant.
It just shoves it right to the front of your mind.
Exactly. It pushes it to the forefront.
So then we arrive at method 4. The thought is stubborn, it's super loud, and the direct approach is just completely failing. And this is where the core shift happens in the text.
It's a total paradigm shift.
Right, because the instruction here isn't to deal with the content of the thought itself, but to calm the mental activity that's producing it. We stop looking at the what and start addressing the how.
That distinction is everything. The Buddha's instruction here is to attend to the relaxing of thought fabrication.
Clock fabrication, I love that term.
I want to linger on it for a second, actually, because fabrication implies a manufacturing process. When a stressful thought arises, we usually grab it and start building on it, right?
Oh, absolutely. We add memories. We project future worst-case scenarios.
Yeah.
We draft entire imaginary arguments in the shower.
Yes, we are literally fabricating our reality in that exact moment.
Wait, so if I'm worrying, I have to admit, I struggle with this step. If my brain is flashing a warning sign about a big presentation tomorrow, my instinct is that I have to fight the thought with a new argument or like a better story to soothe myself.
Right, you feel like you have to fix it.
Yeah, it feels irresponsible to just stop. My brain is telling me, solve this problem now or else. But the text says we must stop adding new ideas and stories. We just stop following it.
That is the evolutionary trick of anxiety right there. It convinces you that thinking about a threat is the exact same thing as protecting yourself from it.
Wow, yeah. That makes so much sense.
But the underlying philosophy here completely challenges that assumption. When you argue with your worries, even if you're trying to soothe yourself by saying, the presentation will be fine because of X, Y, and Z,
You're still feeding it.
you're still keeping the factory open. You are still churning out mental content.
You're feeding the machine. I mean, every new counter-argument just keeps the engine running.
Exactly. And that is why the instruction is not to forcefully shut the factory down, but to just stop feeding it raw materials. You allow the entire thinking process to become quieter by, well, just not participating in it.
But, okay, how do we actually do that without forcing it? Because if I command myself to, like, stop thinking, I just create a whole new kind of tension. My mind is still rigid, just in a different way.
And that's where the ancient analogies really shine, because they guide us away from that force and toward a natural settling. Ratamathero highlights this brilliant simile from the original text about a person walking.
Oh, the walking simile. I love this one. The progression is so helpful for managing expectations.
It really is.
So the Buddha describes a person who is walking very quickly. And while they are speed walking, they kind of catch themselves and think, why am I walking so fast? I should walk more slowly. So they transition to a slow walk.
And then they take it a step further. They realize they don't need to walk at all, so they stop and they just stand still.
Right. And from standing, they decide to sit down. And finally, from sitting, they realize they can just lie down and completely relax. It's like every single step is a gradual deceleration.
What's fascinating here is the psychology embedded in that progression. It's profound.
Yeah.
It addresses the exact frustration you just mentioned about trying to force the mind to stop. When you're in an anxiety spiral, your mind is at a full sprint. You cannot demand that it instantly lie down.
It's impossible.
Right. If you expect immediate stillness, you're setting yourself up for failure, which, only generates more frustration.
It's like slamming on the brakes at 80 miles an hour. You just end up skidding out of control.
Exactly. Instead, you have to downshift. You gently guide the mind from a coarse, highly agitated state to a slightly more refined one. You go from the sprint to the walk to the stand.
You're just allowing the mind to settle at its own pace.
Precisely.
The book pairs this with another analogy that makes the mechanics of this downshifting even clearer, and it's the boiling pot of water analogy.
That's a great one.
Right. Like if you imagine a pot of water boiling violently on a stove, the water is agitated because the heat is on high. If you want that water to become still, what is the most illogical thing you could do?
Well, you wouldn't press down on the bubbles.
Oh.
You wouldn't yell at the water to be calm.
But that is exactly what we do to our own minds. We scream internally, stop worrying. We try to forcefully suppress those bubbling thoughts. But the text's analogy reminds us that the water was never forced into calmness.
Right. The calmness is just what happens naturally when you remove the conditions.
Exactly. You turn down the burner, and the water naturally stops boiling. Anger, craving, worry, they only continue because we keep adding mental fuel.
Applying that to human psychology, the heat is our mental energy. These states don't have their own independent battery packs, They are entirely powered by our continued attention.
That's a really good point.
Every time we analyze a past mistake or every time we imagine a future failure, we are just turning the dial up on the stove.
Which brings us back to that 2 a.m. scenario. If I'm lying there agonizing over something I said at dinner, I am basically just boiling the water. The shift is realizing that I don't have to resolve the dinner conversation to get to sleep. I just have to stop turning the dial.
The theory is elegant, yes. But putting it into practice on a Tuesday afternoon when life gets stressful requires a shift in how we relate to our bodies.
Right, because theory is great. But how does this look in everyday life?
Well, Ratanathero provides some perfect everyday examples that show exactly what it looks like to turn down the heat in modern life.
Let's map this onto scenario 1 from the text, the meeting. I think anyone can relate to this. You have a massive meeting tomorrow. The stakes are super high, and your mind is rapidly spiraling. Like, what if my slides don't work? What if my boss asks a question I can't answer?
The burner is on high.
It's on full blast. And you've tried reminding yourself you're prepared. You've tried to distract yourself. But the thoughts just keep regenerating.
So the first 3 methods haven't worked.
Right. So we deploy the 4th method. And here's where it gets really interesting, because the approach becomes incredibly physical.
Yes, it shifts entirely.
Instead of thinking, you drop the narrative and take a comfortable posture. You notice your breathing, allowing it to become slow. And then, and this is the key instruction, you relax your shoulders, your jaw, and your hands.
We often overlook how much tension we store in those specific areas when we're stressed out. That tension is literally the physical manifestation of thought fabrication.
Oh, wow.
Your brain is creating an imaginary threat, and your nervous system is responding by bracing for a physical impact. Your shoulders hike up, your jaw clenches, your hands tighten.
So by consciously relaxing those muscles, we're basically reverse engineering the problem.
That is the physiological mechanism at play here, yeah. When
Yeah.
your body is tense, it sends a signal back to the brain confirming that there is an emergency, which of course prompts the brain to generate more anxious thoughts to solve the emergency.
A vicious cycle.
Exactly. But by dropping your shoulders and softening your jaw, you are sending a contradictory signal. You're telling your brain, hey, we are safe. There is no tiger in the room.
It starves the anxious thought of its physical fuel. Like you take all that mental energy that was going into the what-ifs of tomorrow's meeting, and you pour it exclusively into the physical sensation of the breath and relaxing those muscles.
And as the body lets go of its defensive posture, the mind slowly realizes it just doesn't need to keep generating threats.
Now, you brought up a second scenario from the text earlier, the commute. Let's talk about that one.
Right. So imagine someone criticized you harshly at work, and hours later you're driving home, but mentally you are still in the office. You're replaying the interaction, thinking of all the clever things you should have said.
Oh, the classic imaginary argument just taking place in traffic. You are fully fabricating an alternate reality.
And in doing so, you are keeping the physiological stress response active hours after the actual event ended. So the text outlines a solution here. You consciously initiate the deceleration process, and the first step is to remove external stimulation. Turn off the radio.
Honestly, that alone can be so uncomfortable. We use noise to drown out the internal chatter.
We really do. But turning it off forces you to confront the agitation, which is necessary if you want to calm it. Once it's quiet, you don't engage with the imaginary argument. Instead, you ground yourself in physical reality.
How so?
You notice the feeling of your hands on the steering wheel. You feel the rhythm of your breathing. You become aware of the physical movement of the car, entirely bypassing any analysis of that earlier conversation.
You're literally stepping out of the conceptual world of the argument and into the physical present. You allow each breath to soften the lingering tension. And, the promise of this method is that without forcing a change in your mood, the emotional intensity will gradually dissipate.
By the time you pull into your driveway, you have walked down from a sprint to a standstill.
And it's so clear that this same physical relaxation, the forehead, eyes, jaw, is exactly what we're supposed to do in meditation when thoughts arise. It really explains why tranquility meditation, or samatha, begins with relaxing the body.
The instructions for handling distractions in meditation are identical to how we handle the meeting anxiety or the commute anger, because the mechanism of the mind is exactly the same.
Right.
When you sit down to meditate and a distracting thought arises, the instruction is not to become frustrated with yourself. You don't chase the thought, and you certainly don't analyze why it appeared.
You just relax the body, soften the forehead, let the breathing find its own rhythm. But I want to dive a little deeper into the actual physics of thought here. Like, why does this physical relaxation actually starve our unwholesome thoughts?
Well, it comes down to a fundamental law of mental energy detailed in the text. Every single thought requires mental energy to exist. A thought is an active process. It's not a static object.
It's an event, not a thing.
Exactly. And the more complex the thought, the more we analyze or react, the more energy it demands. We are actively powering the anxiety. But our attention is a finite resource.
See.
When we deliberately shift that resource away from the conceptual story and direct it towards softening the physical body, the thought is suddenly cut off from its power supply. We're removing the conditions that sustain it.
So what does this all mean for the listener? I guess it means we can't eliminate thoughts directly. We always want a mental delete button, but we can't just reach in and pull out the anxiety.
No, direct elimination doesn't work.
It's like the text's final beautiful image of muddy water. We just leave it undisturbed and it clears on its own, right?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, yes, exactly. If you have a glass of muddy water, you can't reach in and pull out the dirt particles.
You just stir it up more.
Right. The only way to clear it is to place the glass on a table and leave it completely undisturbed. Gravity takes over. By not stirring the mind with endless thinking, unwholesome thoughts naturally lose momentum and just fade away.
And that naturally leads to concentration and inner peace.
From walking quickly to walking slowly to standing, sitting, and finally lying down.
To bring this all together, Ratanathero distills this entire philosophy into a really practical takeaway. He gives the reader 3 simple reflection questions.
They're so useful.
The next time you find yourself caught in an endless loop, whether you're lying in bed at 2 a.m. or gripping the steering wheel, Don't fight the thoughts. Instead, ask yourself, number one, can I soften my thinking?
Number two, can I relax my body?
And number three, can I simply rest with this breath instead of creating another thought? Just gentle cues to help you let the dirt settle to the bottom of the glass.
And that really wraps up our exploration of the fourth method. But, it is important to remind you that this is just the end of Chapter 4 in Venerable Ratanathero's book.
The journey isn't over.
Not at all. Chapter 5 is coming next, so the discussion is definitely to be continued.
We have a lot more ground to cover. But before we go, I want to leave you with one final provocative thought to ponder. We've seen how much mental energy it takes to sustain our own distress.
It takes a lot.
So if our anxiety and our anger require our active mental energy to survive, what other stressful parts of your life might just naturally settle, like undisturbed muddy water, if you simply stopped feeding them your attention?
It's a profound question. It really makes you wonder how much of our exhaustion is just self-generated.
Stop stirring the water. Take a breath, check your jaw for tension, and just let it settle. We will see you next time as we dive into Chapter 5.